Positives with no points and a self-inflicted wound leading up to a goal from outside the box. I made no horror and joined an independent.ie with soccer correspondent Daniel McDonnell. And as so often, Stephen Kenny and Aidan against strong opposition. It was kind of a game we'd seen before.
Yeah, probably not against that good a team, to be fair, but and not probably at home. I know there was games. The game against Serbia at home was very different. Portugal was different in some ways too. There was a great nervous energy in the stadium tonight that you sort of, like I think after 10 minutes in the game, I sort of looked at the watch and thinking it might be 20, 20 or 25. And there was that sense of, I think we spoke about this after the Latvia game, like every tackle was met with every action of the game was almost, there was people on tenterhooks around it, particularly any of the Irish touches. To contrast to Latvia, where it's just like disinterest, almost people chatting.
Yeah.
So it was great to be watching a real proper, meaningful, competitive game where everything was on the line. But yeah, I think we've seen the outcome before, and we've seen probably how you get to the outcome before. I mean, it is one where you come away from it thinking, yeah, that was encouraging. I think, as I always say, in isolation, right? If you just arrived down from wherever and you were told nothing about what's gone before, you couldn't look at that Irish team and say, Jesus, they're a shambles. Like they don't know what they're doing.
No.
They look like a team that's well coached and operating to a plan and quite diligent in doing it. But where we've been here before is that we come away from it thinking, yeah, this is really encouraging. But unfortunately, what's happened before has never quite backed it up, and that's the new story we're looking to write in this campaign now. And that's like we sit with 0 points, and that's the crude bottom line in a campaign where tough draw or no tough draw, it is all about the results more so than anything else, and that's so it's obviously naturally very deflating and frustrating.
Absolutely. I think we talked before on the League of Ireland video that we do. I mentioned Shelbourne a couple of weeks ago, and watching them has been like a defensive. If you're doing your UEFA license and you'd want to watch a defensive team and how they set up, that was very similar Ireland and France in terms of as soon as France got the ball, Ireland were in there. I mean, Kenny had spoken before they weren't going to play a low block or whatever, sit deep. They did. They put five players across the back, four across in a very narrow gap in front of them, and then seemed like one up front. Absolutely nothing wrong with them. I mean, some of the stuff post match was like, I'd like to see us take them on more. You're not going to take France on because if you do, you're going to. Holland tried to take them on for 10 minutes and they're 2-0 down. So, like defensively, they were set up absolutely brilliant. And there's no. You couldn't find a way really of criticising the coaching system at all in terms of the way they were set up, and it was just. It was interesting how much the crowd got into that kind of thing where, then you get the odd clip ball down the line, which again it's not total football stuff. It was very effective. We spoke again before about how pragmatic Kenny can be, and it was a very pragmatic performance. It was as high on the bar of a pragmatic performance as you could get, really.
Yeah, like we did make this point before. Often they're a lot more pragmatic on the pitch than the press conference pitch, and it's another advertisement of it. And sometimes you find yourself analyzing the press conferences maybe as much as analyzing the games, and the press conference words that maybe fuel a lot of elements of the reaction afterwards, rather than being able to find much wrong with the performance. I think, yeah, they probably did operate in a little bit lower block than I thought, I have to say, but maybe just 5 yard, 10 yard. I think what was striking was how conservative Seamus Coleman was, and that was clearly the game plan. I mean, he was the right. On paper, he was the right wing back, but it was more like an auxiliary right back, really, or just he there was even Sarah. I made this point in my piece on the match. Like there was times in the first half where there was probably a diagonal to Seamus Coleman on, and he wasn't even necessarily inviting it too much. It was very much the game plan was almost not get across the halfway line territory, not as blunt as that, but it was a version of it. But yeah, they managed their spaces, like as I'm talking about spaces before, and pretty well. Like we never had that Mbappe one-on-one situation, which everyone asked people in press conference who'd win in the race. They engineered so that they didn't get into that position. There was the odd moment in the first half where it was actually the French fullbacks who were getting the space. But the mad thing about it is Like I wasn't hung up on the long range goal thing after the weekend. Just in the after Latvia, sorry, in the context of this game, because I didn't think it would be a problem in this game. And I feel like while this was a long range goal, it was a very different type of one in a way. It wasn't one from the product of the ball being lost 30 yards up the park and people being slow to get back. It really was bad pass at the wrong time. Now, maybe you can find similarities with it. But again, I mean, it's a hell of a strike, and sometimes that shot goes wide, and you never discuss that action again. And sometimes just
I mean, look, I think certainly in terms of France, I reckon you give, I'd say, they're 10 outfield players. You give them 5 shots each from that range. I think they'll score quite a serious percentage of them. I mean, when you look at it again, the goal where, like, when the ball falls to Cullen, it's really interesting because when I saw the replays of the goal and I looked at Darragh O'Shea and thought, could he got closer to it? When you see Cullen on the ball, I think it's Matt Doherty over on the left hand side, just sprints beyond Cullen, and Pavard's actually in trouble. Like, if he plays the right pass, which is the pass in behind, obviously it's easy in hindsight. It's the pass in behind Pavard. Doherty's off like a train. But as soon as Doherty goes, it means there's no cover there, which means Darragh O'Shea can't go to close the ball, because if he goes to close the ball, there's a little slip of a pass inside. Even Bazunu kind of takes a step to his left a little bit as the ball is given away, because he's expecting to be. So everyone's in trouble. I guess the question is whether we're in danger of going into Stephen Kenny culture wars here, where is that pass something that's actively encouraged? Do you get it 20 yards out from your goal and look to go sideways, or are you looking to go forward? Because even had the pass come off, I think it was to Jason Knight, I'm right in saying, or Malumbi, I'm not sure which one.
It was Knight, yeah.
It was Knight, but even if the pass had gone to Knight, it was still a woeful pass, because Knight was behind him. It wasn't like it was intercepted when the pass was going in front of him. It was just from the one player in that team that you expect to make the right pass at the right time. It was unfortunate, but a lot of unfortunate things seem to keep happening to the team.
I'd often watch the game back. You'd like to watch it back and see how many times was a similar pass tried in the game, and we don't talk about it afterwards. And it was just like the perfect storm in terms of the response to it. But the thing about it for me, anyway, like generally, like it's a frustrating one to concede. The Ireland, I think, finished the game well. Now, again, you could say that's like a lot of Ireland games over the years, 1-0 in the last 10 minutes, they're having a go. But I think some of the changes were fine, actually. The wing backs did well when they come on. Even bringing off Ferguson could probably send some people not being sure about it, but I think Adam Ida probably was the right sub. His style, he sort of managed to pull France out of shape a little bit more. I think it was a good learning curve for Ferguson. We're learning more about Ferguson as a player as well. He's not necessarily going to do that for you. He's not necessarily going to go down the sides in that type of game. But the thing about it for me, and the general thing is, so that was good, right? You can't. I don't think. I think you'd be sort of hypercritical to find fault with it. But the next game is so different, and I think the thing with Ireland previously, like, there's been these valiant near misses before, and there's been a game 3 days later that's really hurt them. Like, you think, after Faro, it was Azerbaijan at home. After Belgrade, it was Luxembourg at home. Even after Scotland last year, Ireland lost, but then they beat Armenia 3 days later. But that was actually a bit of a buzzkill, because it was actually pretty poor. And now there's 3 months, and it's a question of how did the group leave? How do they go away, respond to it, process it? And is it a case that in June, I think there's probably, as much as the heat is an excuse around Greece for sure, and that's obviously going to be a difficulty, but they're going to have a long run in for a game plan for a game where it's not about organizing yourself to be contained, to contain an opponent. It's about a winning game plan, which is still, in that type of game, is the one thing that Ireland haven't done yet under Kenny Reedy. Scotland at home being the exception. And that's the next test now. And I feel like all the positivity around this game will completely evaporate and be gone if Ireland don't do the business in Athens. And that's the reality, I think, of where we are.
Yeah. I suppose keeping the ball, all that kind of philosophy, etc. Like, that's where you want to do it. That kind of heat against relatively similar level team, that's really when it should come to fruition. The plans, if you like, should come to fruition. I mean, Dan, you were down obviously, after the game with the players, in close proximity to the players, close proximity to the manager. What was the feeling like? Was it deflation? Was it optimism in terms of looking ahead? Was it too soon after the game, even for that part? What was the mood like after?
Look, I think a lot of the comments are along the same lines. Proud of the performance, devastated. Yeah, trying to ask Kenny a bit more about the mood, and I think there's that halfway house between a degree of pride. It's the degree of, yes, this is a young team that's improving, versus, I think it was Seamus Coleman who said it, like, it's one thing to do it under the lights at home, and we have to follow it up. And I think, with the older players, you see this is maybe their last chance of a tournament in some cases, and so they don't really want a little pat on the back, after these things anymore. And as much as the group is like dreadfully frustrating, I think this team like needs to experience winning together. I just think that's a big thing for me. I think you can see the age profile of the team, and there's lots of reasons to believe Ireland are going to be a good side in the next decade. But it's about getting over that line initially and becoming winners, becoming sort of people who you can trust to get that job done. And again, just these honorable defeats, like there's been quite a few of them, and you just want, I think there's just a collective want to experience that next step, to see where it takes them. And let's be honest, to the bigger picture of this campaign, I mean, there's all these other angles to it. Like, Ireland may end up watching permutations of results in other games later half of the year. Like, I was looking at Austria coming back to beat Estonia tonight and thinking that's a good result. No one else really needs to know why that is at the moment. But this stuff like does matter. And it's a case of building the belief that, and this is the reality of it, will Ireland get a playoff? Reasonable chance. Do you trust that this time, 12 months from now, is when the Euros playoffs take place? And if Ireland haven't finished in the top two of their group, do you believe that, this group are capable of killing off teams of similar standing and similar level? And I think that's the crux of the whole Kenny thing, the whole where this generation is at. They're very good at raising their game and causing problems. And I think, I know that they played to contain, but there is, there's some good passages that are probably, they approach it a little bit different to Irish teams of the past in their approach. But it's about actually putting that to good use in a certain type of fixture, and that's the next test now.
Yeah, we'll have a fair long lead into that to talk a few months to get there yet. Dan, thanks very much for joining us, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you.